Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make a fume extractor out of a broken hairdryer. It's going to be very affordable and very useful in your workshop. Especially if you're a maker like me, you probably do a lot of soldering. And when soldering, solder creates extra fumes that shouldn't be breathed in. These fumes are bad for your health and you need a fume extractor. A fume extractor is necessary for your health because in leaded solder there is flux fumes and lead fumes, so these fumes you shouldn't breathe in and they're obviously bad for your health, so you should have a fume extractor in a well ventilated area. This is a fume extractor that has two fans from broken hair dryers, and it has a power connector here. I power it from an old laptop adapter that is 19 volts, and it's got a car filter on the back side. It's a car cabin air filter. This will filter most of the fumes away, but some of the fumes will still pass through this. So when soldering, even if you have this fume extractor, I advise you to do your soldering in a well ventilated area. You can find these cheap car air cabin air filters really cheap on the internet for about 200 Turkish liras at most, and for around $10, I think. You can find them very cheap. And broken hair dryer parts are basically just free. I recommend putting these covers, metal covers, on the fans. If something gets inside the blades of the fans, it can break the blades, which will make this rendered useless. Here is also a power setting switch. On the middle, it only runs this fan, and on the bottom, it runs both of the fans, allowing max airflow. By the way, this cabin air filter is for a Fiat Tipo, and you can buy them very cheap. This cabin air filter, the airflow was marked wrong. It was showing an arrow like this, but when I put some airflow through this, it wouldn't pass. It would just get blocked and just spread. But the actual airflow was meant to be like this, not like this. So on cheap filters they might put the airflow direction arrow wrong, so look out for that. These cheap hairdryer motors are usually meant to run between 12 and 24 volts. If you want them to run quietly, even if it's not going to be all that effective, if you're in a well ventilated area, you can power these motors with 12 volts, but I recommend using up to 24 volts if you can. As you can see on this motor it says 24 volts, and I'm supplying these fans with 19 volts of DC voltage. Even though hair dryers are connected to AC, these motors inside of them are DC. That's because they have a full bridge rectifier and a resistor to limit the voltage from 230 to around 24 volts. And these motors also make a lot of interference, which they can damage your power supply. And I recommend adding capacitors inside of these motors, even though this one has a capacitor in it, as you can see, both on two sides, two capacitors in it. This is to make the motor make less interference and it wouldn't damage your power supply that you're supplying to this motor. But if you look inside of the fan motors, if you see two capacitors, you don't have to put extra tantalum capacitors in them in parallel in the motors to decrease the interference. And on these two motors they both had capacitors in them, so I didn't add them. How I power this fume extractor is an old laptop power supply. If I look on it, it says 19 volts 4.74 amps, and at 19 volts these fans usually draw about an amp, so you should probably use a powerful power supply like this. One single fan would be good enough, but I wanted it to be more effective, so I added two fans. But you don't have to add two of them, only one of them could work too. So let's see it in action. So I'm going to plug the laptop charger in to the wall socket. Here I have. My soldering iron started to smell like solder because I left it on before filming, so that I can demonstrate how this works. Here is the DC in. like this, and on the first part of the switch, like half pressed, it only runs this motor. And if I put it on max power, it runs both of them. And there's a lot of airflow on the back. So I'm going to take my soldering iron, put this near here. Now let's pretend that we're soldering something. Look at these fumes. There are a lot of fumes, and they're not healthy for breathing. They're not healthy for your health. And even on the first, even when I'm running the first fan, it just sucks all the fumes away. Even more fumes. Even with a single fan, it sucks most of the smoke away. Now if I turn on the second one, you can't see any fumes almost. You almost can't see any fumes. It works really well. It's pretty loud, but it works really well, and it picks up most of the fumes. I would rather prefer not smelling the smoke of the solder than hearing this. If you want them to be quieter, you can use them at 12 volts, but I recommend going for 19 or 24 volts. That's because if you go with 19 or 24 volts, you're gonna get much more airflow, and it's gonna be a lot more better. So this is how you make affordable and cheap, basically for almost nothing except this filter that you need to buy and a little bit of hot glue and some cardboard, and that's it. And also you need to just buy a power supply for the little fans. And that's how to make a fume extractor that is very affordable. Thanks for watching. If you found my video useful, please consider subscribing, and please don't forget to like my video. This is Arduino Atelier. See you on the next video. Stay safe.